The resignation letter sat on the polished mahogany desk between them, unsigned, unspoken, but inevitable. Ethan Carter had never imagined his career would end like this, forced to choose between the company he'd helped build and the woman he'd fallen for. But she wasn't just any woman. She was Adrienne Vale, his CEO, the most powerful person in the building, and the one relationship that could destroy everything they'd both worked for. The board wanted him gone. She'd tried to save him. Now, standing in her corner office overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline, Ethan was about to make the choice that would change both their lives forever. If you want to see how this impossible situation unfolded, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Ethan Carter had become an expert at living small. His apartment in Lincoln Park occupied the third floor of a renovated brownstone, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen barely large enough for the small table where he and his daughter ate breakfast every morning. The furniture was practical: a couch from IKEA, a coffee table he'd assembled himself, bookshelves lined with strategic planning texts, and a handful of children's books that Maya left scattered across every available surface. It wasn't much, but it was his. More importantly, it was stable. After the divorce, stability had become Ethan's religion. He'd moved to Chicago 3 years ago, carrying nothing but 2 suitcases and a determination to rebuild something resembling a life. The marriage had ended quietly. No dramatic confrontations, no thrown dishes or screaming matches. Just 2 people who'd stopped knowing how to talk to each other, sitting across a mediation table and dividing their lives into neat legal categories. She got the house in Minneapolis. He got weekends with Maya and a fresh start in a city where nobody knew his story. The job at Vale Communications had appeared at exactly the right moment. Senior Strategic Analyst, a position that paid well enough to afford the apartment and still send support payments back to Minneapolis every month. The work itself was demanding but straightforward. Analyze client communications, develop messaging strategies, present findings to senior leadership. Ethan was good at it. He had a talent for seeing patterns others missed, for understanding not just what clients said, but what they actually meant. His colleagues at Vale Communications had tried, in those early months, to pull him into the social fabric of the office. Happy hours at the bar across the street, weekend softball games in Grant Park, birthday celebrations in conference rooms decorated with grocery store sheet cake and balloons from Walgreens. Ethan declined politely every time. It wasn't personal. He simply didn't have the energy for office friendships anymore. Work was work. Home was Maya. Everything else was excess. By his 2nd year at the company, people stopped inviting him. They stopped asking about his weekend plans or whether he'd caught the Bears game. Ethan became the guy who arrived at 8:30, worked through lunch at his desk, and left at 5:15 to pick up Maya from after-school care. Reliable, competent, forgettable. He preferred it that way. Maya was 7 now, bright, curious, and stubborn in ways that reminded Ethan painfully of himself. She loved dinosaurs with an intensity that bordered on obsession, insisted on wearing the same purple sneakers until they literally fell apart, and asked approximately 400 questions per day about subjects ranging from why the sky was blue to whether penguins had knees. Every other weekend she flew back to Minneapolis to stay with her mother. Those weekends stretched long and quiet in the apartment. Ethan usually spent them reviewing work reports, meal prepping for the week ahead, and trying not to think too hard about how thoroughly his life had narrowed. He'd stopped dating entirely. A few colleagues had offered to set him up over the years, a friend of a friend, a cousin visiting from out of town, someone's yoga instructor who was really great once you got to know her. Ethan always said no. The idea of sitting across from a stranger, performing enthusiasm for shared interests he didn't have, felt exhausting in ways he couldn't adequately explain. Besides, he'd tried marriage. He knew how it ended. So when Marcus Webb appeared at his cubicle one Thursday afternoon in late September, Ethan's first instinct was suspicion. Marcus was Vale Communications' chief operating officer, a position that placed him exactly 1 step below Adrienne Vale herself in the corporate hierarchy. He was the kind of executive who wore expensive suits that fit perfectly, who remembered everyone's names and asked about their kids, who managed to project both authority and approachability in equal measure. Ethan had maybe spoken to Marcus 3 times in 3 years. Brief exchanges in elevators, nods across crowded conference rooms, the kind of minimal interaction that defined relationships between senior leadership and mid-level analysts. So Marcus Webb, standing beside his cubicle, smiling like they were old friends, was immediately concerning. "Ethan," Marcus said warmly, "got a minute?" Ethan glanced at the strategic analysis report open on his monitors, a client presentation due tomorrow morning. "Sure. What do you need?" "Not here," Marcus gestured toward the hallway. "Walk with me?" Now Ethan was really suspicious. "But you didn't say no to the COO," so he saved his work and followed Marcus down the corridor toward the executive wing. Vale Communications occupied 4 floors of a glass and steel tower in the loop. The lower floors housed the analysts, coordinators, and junior staff, cubicles arranged in neat rows beneath fluorescent lights. The top floor belonged to senior leadership, corner offices with real walls, actual windows, and the kind of profound quiet that came from being insulated from everyone else's chaos. Marcus led him to a small conference room Ethan had never entered before. Glass walls, lake view, furniture that probably cost more than Ethan's entire apartment. "Sit," Marcus said, closing the door. Ethan sat. His mind cycled through possibilities. Performance review? Layoffs? Some client disaster he hadn't heard about yet? Marcus settled into the chair across from him, his expression shifting from professional friendliness to something more genuine. "How long have you been with us now, Ethan?" 3 years. Almost 3.5. "And how are you finding it? The work, the company, Chicago?" Ethan hesitated. This wasn't a normal conversation. "It's good. Stable. I appreciate the opportunity." Marcus nodded slowly, like Ethan had just confirmed something. "You keep to yourself." It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't know how to respond, so he didn't. "That's not a criticism," Marcus continued. "Just an observation. You do excellent work. Your client analyses are some of the sharpest we get, but you don't really engage with the team, with the company culture." "I focus on the work," Ethan said carefully. "You do. Very focused." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ethan's guard went up immediately. "Depends on the question." "When was the last time you went on a date?" The question landed like a brick through a window. Ethan stared at Marcus, trying to determine if this was actually happening. "Excuse me?" "A date. Dinner, drinks, another human being whose company you enjoyed. When was the last time?" "I don't think that's really—" 3 years, Marcus said. "According to Sarah in HR, you haven't updated your emergency contact since you started here. Still lists your ex-wife. You've never brought anyone to a company event, never mentioned a partner or even a casual relationship." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Is HR monitoring my personal life now?" "No. I'm monitoring it because I'm concerned." Marcus's voice softened. "Look, Ethan, I get it. Divorce is brutal. Rebuilding is hard. But you can't live like this forever." "Like what?" "Like you're serving a sentence." The words hit harder than they should have. Ethan looked away toward the window and the city stretching out beyond it. "My personal life is my business." "Usually, yes, but I'm making it my business because I care about my people, and you're one of my people." Marcus paused. "I want to set you up." Ethan's head snapped back around. "What?" "A blind date. This weekend, Saturday night. I know someone I think you'd really connect with. Smart, interesting, successful. Absolutely not." "Ethan? No. I appreciate the concern, but no." Ethan stood up. "Is that all?" Marcus didn't move. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Ethan sat. "I'm going to be honest with you," Marcus said quietly. "This isn't just about you being lonely. Although you are lonely, whether you want to admit it or not. This is about you sleepwalking through your life, and I don't want to watch you waste another 3 years doing it." "I'm not wasting anything. I'm working. I'm raising my daughter. I'm hiding," Marcus finished. "You're hiding, and I understand why. But hiding isn't the same as healing." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell Marcus he was wrong, that he was fine, that his life was exactly as full as it needed to be. But something about the gentleness in Marcus's expression made the words stick in his throat. "One dinner," Marcus said. 2 hours of your life. If it's terrible, you never have to do it again. But if there's even a chance it might be good, wouldn't that be worth it? Ethan closed his eyes. He thought about Maya, who kept asking why Daddy never had any friends over. He thought about the weekends alone in the apartment, the silence that felt less peaceful and more suffocating with each passing month. He thought about the last time someone had touched him with affection, really touched him, not just a handshake or an accidental brush in a crowded elevator. He couldn't remember. "Where?" he asked finally. Marcus smiled. "Ventoux, 8 o'clock Saturday. Reservation under your name." Ventoux was expensive, the kind of Gold Coast restaurant where executives took clients they wanted to impress. Ethan had never been inside. "That's a pretty serious first date." "It's a pretty serious setup." Marcus stood, straightening his suit jacket. "Wear something nice. Be yourself. Try to have fun. You're not going to tell me anything about this person?" "Nope. That's what makes it a blind date." "Marcus, trust me, Ethan. Just this once." Marcus opened the conference room door. "Oh, and don't be late. This person doesn't appreciate waiting." Then he was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the expensive conference room with a commitment he already regretted. Saturday night. Ethan spent most of Saturday in a state of low-grade anxiety. He dropped Maya off at O'Hare for her weekend flight to Minneapolis, endured her usual battery of questions. "Where are you going tonight, Daddy? Who are you meeting? Is she nice? Are you going to marry her?" And drove back to Lincoln Park with the radio off and his thoughts spiraling. This was a mistake. He should cancel. He could text Marcus, claim a sudden illness, reschedule indefinitely, and hope everyone forgot about it. But he'd made a promise, and Ethan kept his promises. He showered, shaved, and spent 20 minutes staring at his closet before selecting a navy blazer, white shirt, and dark jeans. Nice enough for an upscale restaurant without looking like he was trying too hard. His dress shoes hadn't been worn in months. They felt stiff and uncomfortable as he slipped them on. The drive to Gold Coast took 40 minutes through Saturday evening traffic. Ethan found parking 3 blocks from the restaurant and walked slowly, rehearsing conversation starters in his head and hating every single one of them. Ventoux occupied the ground floor of a historic building on Rush Street. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft lighting, a host stand staffed by a young woman in an elegant black dress who smiled professionally as he approached. "Reservation?" she asked. "Carter. 8 o'clock." She checked her tablet, and something shifted in her expression, a brief flicker of recognition or surprise. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Right this way." She led him through the main dining room. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, the quiet murmur of expensive conversations, and toward a more private section in the back. Ethan's anxiety ratcheted higher with each step. This was too nice, too formal. What kind of first date required this level of setup? Then the host stopped beside a corner table, and Ethan's entire world tilted sideways. Sitting at the table, looking up at him with an expression that mixed composure and barely concealed nervousness, was Adrienne Vale, his CEO, the woman whose signature appeared on his paychecks, whose strategic vision shaped every project he worked on, whose presence in a conference room made senior executives straighten their spines and choose their words carefully. Adrienne Vale, the most powerful person in the company, was his blind date. For several seconds, Ethan forgot how to form words. Adrienne spoke first. "Hello, Ethan." Her voice was the same one he'd heard in board meetings and company presentations, calm, controlled, faintly amused by the chaos around her. But there was something else underneath it now. Uncertainty, maybe, or hope. "Ms. Vale," Ethan managed. "Adrienne," she corrected gently. "Please sit. Unless you'd rather leave, I'd understand if you did." The host had already disappeared. Ethan stood frozen beside the table, his mind racing through impossible calculations. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Marcus had set him up with Adrienne Vale, the woman who ran the entire company. This had to be some kind of elaborate practical joke. But Adrienne wasn't laughing. She watched him with the same intense focus she brought to everything, waiting, assessing, giving him space to make his own choice. Ethan should leave. Every rational instinct screamed at him to apologize politely and walk away. Dating your CEO was a catastrophically bad idea. It violated every professional boundary. It created conflicts of interest. It put his job at risk. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Adrienne's fingers worried at the stem of her wine glass, a gesture of nervousness he'd never seen from her before. Maybe it was the memory of Marcus's words. You're hiding. Hiding isn't the same as healing. Or maybe it was simply that, underneath his shock and confusion, a small part of Ethan was curious. He pulled out the chair and sat down. Adrienne's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Thank you. I don't understand what's happening, Ethan said. A server appeared with menus and water glasses, giving them both a moment to breathe. When he left, Adrienne took a small sip of wine before responding. Marcus didn't tell you it was me. Marcus didn't tell me anything except to show up. That sounds like Marcus. A faint smile crossed her face. He tends toward the dramatic. This is beyond dramatic. This is... Ethan stopped, trying to find words adequate to the situation. You're my boss. I'm aware. You sign my performance reviews. I do. So why... He gestured helplessly at the table, the restaurant, the impossible reality of sitting across from her. Why this? Adrienne set down her wine glass. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more careful. Because I asked Marcus to set you up with someone, and he decided that someone should be me. You asked him to set me up? Yes. Why? She met his eyes directly. Because I've been watching you, Ethan, for longer than you probably realize, and I wanted to know if the person I see in the office is the same person who exists outside it. The honesty of it caught him off guard. Ethan had spent 3 years trying to be invisible at Vale Communications, unremarkable, professional, forgettable. The idea that Adrienne Vale had been watching him upended everything he thought he understood about his place in the company. What do you see? He asked. In the office. Adrienne considered the question carefully. I see someone who's brilliant at his work, but deeply disconnected from it. Someone who shows up exactly on time, leaves exactly on time, and never stays a minute longer than required. Someone who could probably run his own division, but seems content to stay buried in analysis reports where nobody notices him. She paused. I see someone hiding from something, and I wanted to know what. Ethan's throat felt tight. That's a lot of attention to pay to a mid-level analyst. You're not mid-level, not really. Your work is some of the best we get, but you bury it in technical language and defer credit to everyone else. Adrienne leaned forward slightly. Do you know how rare that is? In this industry, people usually can't wait to take credit for things they didn't do. But you do the opposite. You disappear yourself. Maybe I like being invisible. Maybe you've convinced yourself you do. Adrienne's expression softened. Or maybe you're just scared. The word landed between them like a challenge. Ethan wanted to deny it, but the denial wouldn't come. Because she was right. He was scared. Scared of being seen, scared of connecting, scared of building something that could fall apart again. I should go, he said quietly. You should, Adrienne agreed. This violates about a dozen professional protocols. It puts us both in an impossible position. If anyone at the company found out, it would create problems neither of us needs. Then why are you here? She smiled, a real smile this time, not the controlled corporate version. Because I'm tired of being careful. I've spent 15 years building this company, and it's cost me everything else. I don't have friends. I don't have hobbies. I have a corner office and an apartment I barely sleep in, and a calendar full of meetings with people who want something from me. She picked up her wine glass again, turning it slowly. But you don't want anything from me. You've never tried to impress me or network your way into my attention. You just work. Quietly. Competently. Like my authority doesn't matter to you at all. It matters, Ethan said. You run the company, but you don't treat me differently because of it. And that's... She paused, searching for the right word. Refreshing. Everyone else performs for me. You just exist. I'm not sure that's a compliment. It is. Trust me. The server returned with menus. They ordered without really looking at the options. Adrienne chose the salmon, Ethan the steak, both of them going through the motions while the real conversation hung suspended between them. When they were alone again, Ethan asked the question he'd been avoiding. What happens after tonight? I don't know, Adrienne admitted. I didn't plan this far ahead. That doesn't sound like you. No, she agreed. It doesn't. They sat in silence for a moment. the weight of the situation settling around them. Then Ethan surprised himself by laughing, a short, incredulous sound. Adrienne raised an eyebrow. What's funny? This whole thing. 3 years I've been trying to stay invisible, and apparently I failed spectacularly. He shook his head. Marcus ambushed me. Said I was sleepwalking through my life. Were you? Probably. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, not as his CEO, but as the woman sitting across from him. Are you? Something shifted in Adrienne's expression. Vulnerability, maybe, or recognition. Yes, she said softly. I think I have been. The food arrived. They ate slowly, the conversation shifting into safer territory. Adrienne asked about Maya, and Ethan found himself talking about dinosaurs and purple sneakers and the 400 daily questions. Adrienne talked about building the company from nothing, the early years working out of a shared office space, the first major client that almost destroyed them, the moment she realized she'd created something that would outlive her. Do you regret it? Ethan asked. Sacrificing everything else for the company? Adrienne was quiet for a long time. I used to think sacrifice was noble, that giving up personal happiness for professional success was what serious people did. She set down her fork. But lately I've started wondering if I just didn't know how to do both, so I chose the one that felt safer. Building a company from scratch feels safe? Safer than trusting someone with your heart. She met his eyes. Companies follow logic. People don't. Ethan understood that better than he wanted to admit. My marriage ended because we stopped talking. Not fighting, just talking. We became roommates who occasionally discussed whose turn it was to buy milk. He paused. I thought if I could just be quiet enough, stable enough, predictable enough, it would work. But you can't build a relationship on silence. No, Adrienne said. You can't. The restaurant slowly emptied around them. Their server brought dessert menus, and they both declined. The check appeared, and Adrienne reached for it immediately. I can pay, Ethan offered. This was my idea. I'm paying. She handed over a credit card without looking at the total. They walked out into the Chicago night together. September air, cool but not cold yet, carrying the smell of the lake and distant traffic. Ethan's car was 3 blocks south. Adrienne's driver was waiting at the curb. Thank you for staying, Adrienne said. I know this was unusual. That's one word for it. Ethan smiled. I still don't know what happens next. Neither do I. She hesitated, then pulled a business card from her purse and wrote something on the back. That's my personal number, not the office line. If you want to, I don't know, talk. Try this again, whatever this is. Ethan took the card. Her handwriting was precise, elegant. And if I don't call? Then Monday morning we go back to being CEO and analyst. Professional distance, no awkwardness. She said it confidently, but something in her eyes suggested she hoped he wouldn't choose that option. Adrienne? Yes? Why did you really ask Marcus to set me up? She smiled, that real smile again, the one that made her look younger and less guarded. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't notice you, and I wanted to see if you might notice me too. Then she got into the car and was gone, leaving Ethan standing on Rush Street with a business card and 1,000 questions he didn't have answers for. He walked back to his car slowly, his mind racing. This was impossible, reckless, professionally dangerous. Everything about it violated the careful boundaries he'd built around his life. But when he got home to his empty apartment and found the business card still in his pocket, Ethan didn't throw it away. He set it on his kitchen counter, where he'd see it every morning while making coffee. And on Sunday night, after Maya called from Minneapolis to tell him about her weekend, Ethan picked up his phone and texted the number Adrienne had written. Thank you for dinner. I'd like to do it again, somewhere less expensive this time. The response came 3 minutes later. I know a place in Wicker Park. Thursday night? Ethan stared at the message for a long time. He thought about everything that could go wrong. The professional complications, the power dynamics, the risk. Then he thought about Adrienne's smile, the vulnerability in her voice when she admitted she was tired of being careful, the way it felt to talk to someone who actually listened instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. He typed one word and hit send. Yes, the restaurant in Wicker Park was everything Von Tu wasn't. small, crowded, with mismatched chairs and Edison bulbs hanging from exposed ceiling beams. The kind of place where you waited 40 minutes for a table and nobody complained because the food was worth it. Ethan arrived first, claiming a corner booth near the back where they'd have some semblance of privacy. When Adrienne walked through the door at 7:30, she looked different. Jeans, a simple black sweater, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail instead of the severe bun she wore at the office. She spotted him immediately and smiled, weaving through the tables with an ease that surprised him. "This is more my speed," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You don't strike me as a dive bar person. Shows what you know about me." She picked up the menu, scanning it quickly. "I grew up in a neighborhood like this, South Side near Bridgeport. My dad worked construction. My mom cleaned houses. We ate at places with plastic chairs and laminated menus." Ethan blinked. He'd assumed, like everyone at the company probably assumed, that Adrienne came from money. The confidence, the polish, the way she moved through corporate spaces like she'd been born to them. "Surprised?" she asked, catching his expression. "A little. Most people are. I learned early that where you come from matters less than how you present yourself." She set down the menu. "But that doesn't mean I forgot. Some of my best memories are places like this. Real food, real people. No performance required." They ordered tacos for her, a burger for him, and fell into conversation more easily than Ethan expected. Without the shock of that first night, without the formality of Ventu, something between them relaxed. They talked about Chicago, about neighborhoods they'd lived in, and restaurants they'd discovered. Adrienne told stories about the early days of the company, back when she was working 18-hour days and sleeping on a couch in the office. "Why communications?" Ethan asked. "Why build a company around that specifically?" Adrienne leaned back, considering. "Because I watched my parents struggle to be heard their entire lives. They worked hard, followed the rules, did everything right, but nobody listened to them. Nobody took them seriously. And I realized the difference between people who get heard and people who get ignored isn't substance, it's presentation, strategy, knowing how to shape your message so people can't dismiss it." She paused. "I wanted to give people that power, the ability to make their voices matter." "That's not what most communications firms do," Ethan said. "Most just sell spin." "I know, and I hated that, still do." Her expression hardened slightly. "But you can't change an industry from the outside. You have to build something better from within. Show people there's another way." Ethan understood that impulse more than she probably realized. His own work, the strategic analyses that nobody paid attention to, came from the same place. A belief that if you could just present information clearly enough, people would make better decisions. "Do you think it's working?" he asked. "Changing the industry?" "Some days," Adrienne smiled wryly. "Other days I think I'm just another shark in expensive clothes, taking client money and pretending it's noble." "You don't strike me as a shark. You haven't seen me negotiate a contract." They laughed and the food arrived. For a while they ate in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling with forced conversation. Around them, the restaurant hummed with energy. Couples on dates, groups of friends, the bartender calling out orders to the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" Adrienne said eventually. "Sure." "Your divorce, you said you stopped talking, but there must have been more to it than that." Ethan set down his burger, wiping his hands on a napkin while he gathered his thoughts. "We got married young, 23. I thought I knew what I wanted: stability, family, a life that looked normal from the outside. Sarah wanted the same things. We thought that was enough. But it wasn't. No, because we never talked about what those things actually meant to us individually. We just assumed we were on the same page." He paused. "I wanted quiet. She wanted adventure. I needed routine. She needed spontaneity. And instead of talking about it, we just drifted. I'd come home from work and she'd be planning some trip I didn't want to take. She'd suggest going out and I'd say, I was too tired. Eventually we stopped suggesting anything at all." "How long did that last?" "Too long. Maybe 2 years of just existing in the same space without really connecting." Ethan looked down at his hands. When she finally said she wanted out, part of me was relieved. At least it was honest. Adrienne nodded slowly. My marriage lasted 6 months. Ethan's head snapped up. You were married? Briefly, a decade ago before the company took off. He was another entrepreneur, tech startup guy, very ambitious, very certain he was going to change the world. She smiled sadly. We bonded over work, long hours, big dreams, all that, but we never bothered to bond over anything else. When the company started growing and I had to choose between the business and the relationship, I chose the business. He moved to San Francisco. We filed papers. Very civilized. Do you regret it? Honestly? No. He wasn't right for me. But I regret not trying to find someone who was. I just threw myself into work instead and told myself it was enough. She met Ethan's eyes. That's why Marcus set you up. He thinks I've been using the company as an excuse to avoid my personal life. Has he? Probably, but that doesn't make it easier to change. They finished eating and ordered coffee, neither of them in a hurry to leave. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, movies they'd seen, books they'd read, Maya's latest dinosaur obsession. Adrienne asked thoughtful questions about single parenthood, and Ethan found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone in years. She sounds wonderful, Adrienne said when he finished a story about Maya's elaborate theory regarding why T-Rex arms were actually perfect for hugging. She is. Exhausting, but wonderful. Do you want more kids someday? The question caught him off guard. I haven't really thought about it. My life is pretty full with just Maya. That's not the same as not wanting it. No, Ethan admitted. I guess it's not. Adrienne's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it without responding. Sorry, board member. It can wait. You don't have to stay, Ethan said. If you need to deal with work, I don't. I spend enough of my life dealing with work. Right now I'm having coffee with someone I actually want to talk to. She smiled. That's rare enough to prioritize. They left the restaurant just after 9 and walked slowly down Milwaukee Avenue. The neighborhood was alive with Thursday night energy, bars spilling music onto sidewalks, couples window shopping, groups of friends laughing their way between venues. I should get back, Adrienne said when they reached her car. Early meeting tomorrow. Me too. Client presentation at 9. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Can we do this again? Yes. Soon? Yes. Adrienne smiled, and for a moment Ethan thought she might kiss him, but instead she squeezed his hand briefly and got into her car, leaving him standing on the sidewalk with the warmth of that touch still lingering. Over the next 3 weeks, they fell into a pattern. Dinner once or twice a week, always somewhere outside the loop, always somewhere nobody from the company would accidentally see them. They texted between dates, casual messages about their days, recommendations for restaurants or movies, the kind of ongoing conversation that built connection without demanding too much. At the office, they maintained careful distance. Ethan arrived at his usual time, worked at his usual desk, left at his usual hour. Adrienne stayed in her top-floor sanctuary, appearing only for meetings and presentations where Ethan was rarely required. When they did cross paths in conference rooms or elevators, they exchanged polite professional nods and nothing more. It should have felt duplicitous. Instead, it felt necessary, a way to protect something fragile while it grew strong enough to withstand scrutiny. But secrets in office buildings never stayed secret long. The first crack appeared during a company-wide meeting in mid-October. Adrienne was presenting quarterly results to the full staff. 200 people packed into the largest conference room, watching slides about revenue growth and client acquisition. Ethan sat in the back, half listening while he reviewed notes for his own afternoon presentation. Then someone asked a question about strategic planning, and Adrienne's response referenced one of Ethan's recent reports. She didn't say his name, didn't point him out, just mentioned the analysis in passing as she explained the company's messaging evolution. But afterward, as people filed out of the conference room, Marcus appeared at Ethan's elbow. Interesting reference, he said quietly. What? Adrienne citing your work. She doesn't usually mention individual analysts in company meetings. Ethan kept his expression neutral. It was a good report. It was, but she cited good reports before without naming them. Marcus studied him carefully. How'd that blind date go, by the way? Fine? Just fine? Marcus. Relax. I'm not fishing. I'm just observing that you've seemed lighter lately, less haunted. It's good. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder and walked away, leaving Ethan with the uncomfortable awareness that people were starting to notice. The second crack came a week later when Ethan worked late on a client emergency. He was one of the last people left on his floor, hunched over his computer fixing a presentation that needed to go out by midnight, when his phone buzzed. Still at the office? Adrian's text read, "Client disaster. You, top floor. Come up when you're done." Ethan hesitated. The executive floor after hours felt dangerous, even though logically he knew most of the building was empty. But he finished the presentation, sent it off, and took the elevator up. The top floor was quiet and dim, most offices dark except for the light spilling from Adrian's corner suite. He found her behind her desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, surrounded by contracts and legal documents. "Hey," she said, looking up with a tired smile. "Sorry, I know it's late. I just thought if we were both here anyway." "It's fine." Ethan sat in one of her visitor chairs. "Big deal?" "Potential acquisition. Very complicated. Very time-sensitive." She took off her glasses, rubbing her eyes. "I've been reading the same contract clause for an hour, and it still doesn't make sense." "Want another set of eyes?" She slid the document across the desk. Ethan scanned it, his strategic analysis brain automatically breaking down the language into comprehensible pieces. "They're trying to hide a non-compete buried in the payment structure. See here, this clause about future consulting opportunities is actually restricting where you can take clients for 3 years post-acquisition." Adrian leaned forward, reading where he pointed. "Son of a, you're right. How did I miss that?" "You've been reading for an hour. Your brain's tired." "Apparently." She made a note on the contract. "Thank you. I'll have legal rework this whole section." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Adrian asked, "Do you want coffee? I was about to make a pot." "It's almost 11. I know, but I'll be here another 2 hours at least." "Then, yes, coffee sounds good." She had a French press in her office, real coffee, not the break room sludge the rest of the company survived on. They made it together, a small domestic ritual that felt intimate in the quiet building. When it was ready, Adrienne poured 2 cups and they moved to the couch by her window, looking out over the city lights. "This is dangerous," Ethan said quietly. "I know. If someone saw us up here, nobody's here. I checked the security logs before I texted you. We're the only 2 people on this floor." "That's not the point." Ethan set down his coffee cup. "People are starting to notice. Marcus made a comment last week, and you mentioned my report in the company meeting." "You do good work. Why shouldn't I mention it?" "Because you never mentioned anyone else's work by name, just mine." He looked at her. "We have to be more careful." Adrienne was quiet for a long moment. "I don't want to hide you." "We're not hiding. We're being professional." "Is that what we're calling it?" There was an edge to her voice now. "Because it feels a lot like pretending this doesn't exist." "What's the alternative? We announced to the whole company that the CEO is dating an analyst? You know what that would look like." "I know what people would say. That doesn't mean they'd be right." "It doesn't matter if they're right. Perception is reality in a communications firm. You taught me that." Ethan stood, pacing to the window. "If people think I'm getting preferential treatment because we're involved, it undermines everything I've worked for. And it undermines you, too. They'll say you're compromised, playing favorites." "I don't care what they say." "Yes, you do. You've built this company on credibility. You can't afford to lose that." Adrienne stood as well, joining him at the window. "So what are you suggesting? That we stop seeing each other?" "No, but maybe we need to be smarter about it. Keep our professional and personal lives completely separate until what? Until it's convenient? Until people stop paying attention?" She shook her head. "That's not how this works, Ethan. People will always pay attention. There will always be something to manage." "Then we manage it. Together, but carefully." They stared at each other, the tension thick between them. Finally, Adrienne sighed, her anger deflating into exhaustion. "I'm tired of being careful. I've been careful my entire life. It's suffocating." "I know. But suffocating is better than destroyed." "Is it?" The question hung in the air. Ethan didn't have an answer that satisfied either of them. They finished their coffee in strained silence and left separately, Adrienne first, then Ethan 15 minutes later. The careful choreography of people who knew they were being watched, even when no one was there. But the city had eyes everywhere, and secrets, once planted, grew in directions you couldn't control. The third crack appeared 2 days later when Ethan found an anonymous note tucked into his cubicle. Everyone knows. Be careful. He stared at the typed message, his stomach dropping. Who had sent it? Why anonymously? And what exactly did everyone know? He texted Adrienne immediately. We need to talk. Not at the office. Tonight. My place. I'll send you the address. Her apartment was in a high-rise on the lakefront, sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that looked like it came from a design magazine. Ethan had never been there before. She'd kept that part of her life separate, just as he'd kept his apartment and Maya separate from her. But now, standing in her living room with the anonymous note in his pocket, all those careful boundaries felt inadequate. Show me, Adrienne said. He handed her the note. She read it once, then again, her expression hardening. Any idea who sent it? No, it was just there when I got back from lunch. Could be someone who saw us together outside work. Could be someone who's noticed the pattern. Could be someone who's just guessing and trying to stir trouble. She handed the note back. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore it. But if people are talking, they're always talking. That's what people do in offices. Gossip is currency. Adrienne moved to her kitchen, pulling down 2 wine glasses. The question is whether we give them anything real to talk about. What does that mean? She poured wine for both of them, her movements precise and controlled. It means we have 2 choices. We can end this now, before it becomes a real problem. Go back to being CEO and analyst, nothing more. Or we can stop pretending this is casual and actually figure out what we want from each other. Ethan took the wine glass she offered. Those are pretty extreme options. I don't do middle ground well, you've probably noticed. I've noticed. He took a sip, buying time while his thoughts raced. If we keep seeing each other, it gets complicated. Board meetings, performance reviews. Every professional interaction becomes a potential conflict of interest. I know. People will question your judgment, question mine, question every promotion, every project assignment, every decision that involves either of us. I know, Adrienne said again, quieter this time. And you're still willing to risk that? She set down her wine glass and stepped closer to him. I've spent 15 years building something I'm proud of, but I've been lonely every single day of those 15 years. I've told myself it was worth it, that the work mattered more than personal happiness. But lately I've started wondering if I was just scared. If I used the company as an excuse not to risk getting hurt again. Her eyes met his. And then you showed up at that restaurant, and for the first time in years I felt like maybe there was another way to live. A way that included both the work and the person. Ethan's throat felt tight. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it falls apart and we've destroyed everything for nothing? Then at least we tried. At least we didn't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. She touched his face gently. I'm tired of safe, Ethan. Safe has gotten me a corner office and an empty apartment. I want something real. He kissed her then, finally closing the distance they'd been carefully maintaining for weeks. She responded immediately, her arms circling his shoulders, pulling him closer. It felt like permission and surrender all at once. An acknowledgement that whatever they were trying to protect by staying apart was already too important to lose. When they finally pulled back, both breathing hard, Adrienne rested her forehead against his. So that's a yes to option 2. That's a yes to figuring it out as we go, Ethan said. But we have to be smart, strategic. We can't just ignore the professional complications. Agreed. Tomorrow I'll talk to Marcus, get his advice on how to handle the board if questions come up. Maybe we can restructure reporting lines so you're not technically in my chain of command. That might work, and I'll keep my head down, focus on the work, give people no reason to think I'm benefiting from this relationship professionally. You're already one of the best analysts we have. People who matter know that. People who don't matter will still talk. Let them. Adrienne kissed him again, softer this time. I'm done caring what people who don't matter think. They spent the rest of the evening on her couch, talking through scenarios and strategies like they were planning a campaign instead of a relationship. It should have felt clinical. Instead, it felt like partnership. 2 people with different strengths working together toward a common goal. When Ethan finally left just after midnight, the anonymous note was still in his pocket, but its power had diminished. Whatever storm was coming, they'd face it together. The storm arrived faster than either of them expected. Monday morning, Ethan walked into the office to find Marcus waiting at his cubicle. Conference room. Now, Marcus said, his expression grim. Ethan's stomach dropped. What happened? Board meeting, emergency session. Adrian's dealing with them now, but they want to talk to you next. About what? Marcus gave him a look that said Ethan knew exactly what. Someone sent an email to 3 board members over the weekend, anonymous. Detailed your relationship with Adrian, including dates, times, locations where you were seen together. They want answers. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt interminable. Marcus didn't speak, just stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. When the doors opened, a senior board member Ethan had only seen in company presentations was waiting. Mr. Carter, the man said coldly, this way. The conference room held 5 board members, all wearing expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. Adrienne was already there, sitting alone at the head of the table, her face composed but pale. Sit, the senior board member, Richard something, Ethan's panicked brain supplied, commanded. Ethan sat across from Adrienne. She met his eyes briefly, a silent communication passing between them. Whatever happened next, they were in it together. Richard slid a printed email across the table. Ethan scanned it quickly. Every date they'd had dinner, the night he'd gone to her office, even the night at her apartment, though the email didn't specify what happened there, just that he'd arrived at 10 and left after midnight. Is any of this inaccurate? Richard asked. No, Ethan said quietly. So you have been conducting a personal relationship with Ms. Vale? Yes. While employed by this company, while she serves as your ultimate supervisor? Technically, yes, though I don't report directly to Adrienne. My supervisor is... We know your organizational chart, Mr. Carter. The point is the inherent power imbalance and conflict of interest. Richard leaned forward. Did you receive any preferential treatment? Promotions, raises, project assignments based on your personal relationship? No, nothing. Did Ms. Vale use her position to initiate or maintain this relationship? No. We met outside of work. We've kept our professional and personal lives separate. Separate? Another board member, a woman with steel gray hair, laughed harshly. You've been meeting with her in her office after hours. That's hardly separate. Once, Ethan said. One time, while we were both working late, and we discussed a contract issue. It was professional. And then you went to her apartment. On a different night, yes. The gray-haired woman looked at Adrian. You understand how this looks? I understand that my personal life is my own business, Adrian said evenly. As is Ethan's. Neither of us has violated company policy. Neither of us has allowed our relationship to interfere with our work. The appearance of impropriety is enough, Richard countered. This is a communications firm. Our entire business is built on credibility and trust. If clients think our CEO is making decisions based on personal relationships rather than strategic merit, it damages everything we've built. Then we'll restructure, Adrian said. Move Ethan to a different division where there's no reporting relationship. Make it clear that any future performance reviews or compensation decisions go through someone else entirely. That doesn't solve the fundamental problem, the gray-haired woman said. You're still the CEO. He's still an employee. The power dynamic doesn't disappear just because you shuffle org charts. Then what are you suggesting? Adrian's voice had taken on an edge. That I fire someone for dating me? That seems like a far bigger liability. We're suggesting, Richard said carefully, that Mr. Carter consider a voluntary resignation, with a generous severance package, a clean break that allows both of you to pursue your personal relationship without compromising the company. The room went silent. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. They wanted him gone. Not because he'd done anything wrong, just because his existence created complications they didn't want to manage. He looked at Adrienne. Her jaw was tight, her hands clenched on the table. She was fighting for him. He could see that. But she was also calculating odds, measuring costs, trying to find a strategic solution to an impossible problem. And suddenly Ethan understood something Marcus had tried to tell him weeks ago. Hiding wasn't the same as healing, and neither was letting someone else fight your battles. I'll resign, he said quietly. Ethan, Adrian started. It's fine. It's the cleanest solution. He looked at Richard. I'll submit my resignation this afternoon. 2 weeks' notice to transition my projects. After that, I'm done. That's not necessary, Adrienne said, her voice urgent now. We can fight this. You can protect the company, Ethan interrupted gently. That's your job, and you're good at it. But I won't be the reason the board questions your leadership. He stood before anyone could argue further and walked out of the conference room, leaving Adrienne and the board members behind. His hands were shaking by the time he reached the elevator. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to have more time. They were supposed to figure it out together. But maybe some things couldn't be figured out. Maybe some gaps were too wide to bridge. The elevator doors opened, and Ethan stepped inside, watching the executive floor disappear as he descended back to the world where he belonged. Ethan spent the rest of Monday clearing his desk. Not dramatically. He didn't storm out or make a scene. He simply organized files, documented his ongoing projects, and prepared transition notes for whoever would inherit his work. His colleagues gave him strange looks as they passed his cubicle, clearly sensing something had shifted, but no one asked questions. Office gossip traveled fast, but official news traveled faster. And by noon, everyone knew that Ethan Carter had submitted his resignation, effective in 2 weeks. Marcus found him around 3, leaning against the cubicle wall with his arms crossed, and an expression that mixed disappointment with something that might have been respect. You didn't have to fall on your sword, Marcus said quietly. Didn't I? Ethan kept organizing files, not looking up. The board made it pretty clear what they wanted. The board makes a lot of noise. Adrienne could have fought them, and spent the next year dealing with whispers and accusations every time she made a decision that involved me, or didn't involve me. Either way, she loses. Ethan finally met Marcus's eyes. This way is cleaner. Cleaner for who? For everyone. Marcus shook his head slowly. You know what I see when I look at you right now? The same guy who showed up 3 years ago. Still hiding, still choosing the path that keeps you small and safe. The words stung because they were partially true, but only partially. This isn't hiding, this is removing an obstacle. An obstacle to what? Adrienne's career or your own fear of actually fighting for something that matters? You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Marcus pulled up a chair, sitting down so they were eye level. I set you up with her because I saw something in both of you. 2 brilliant people who'd convinced themselves that success meant sacrifice, that you couldn't have the career and the relationship, that wanting both was selfish or naive. He paused. But here's the thing, Ethan. The only person telling you that you had to choose was you. Adrienne was ready to restructure the entire company to make this work. The board would have eventually accepted it because they need her more than they need to control her personal life. But you jumped straight to resignation because it felt familiar, because it let you be the martyr instead of the fighter. Ethan's hand stilled on the files. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. Marcus stood. You've got 2 weeks. Use them to figure out what you actually want instead of just running away from what scares you. He left, and Ethan sat alone in his cubicle, surrounded by 3 years of careful work and quiet competence, wondering if Marcus was right, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. His phone buzzed. Adrienne, please don't do this. He stared at the message for a long time before typing back. It's already done. Then undo it. Come to my office. We'll talk to the board together. That's exactly what we can't do. You know that. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'm not giving up on this. On us. I'm not asking you to. But I can't stay at the company. Not now. So what happens to us? Ethan closed his eyes, trying to find an answer that wasn't just another form of running away. We figure it out. Just not here. The 3 dots appeared once more, then stopped. No response came. Ethan put his phone away and went back to organizing his files, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on his chest like a physical thing. That evening, he picked up Maya from after-school care and took her for pizza at their usual place near the apartment. She chattered about her day, a science project about volcanoes, a friend who'd brought a hamster for show and tell, a book she was reading about paleontologists. Ethan listened, grateful for the distraction, for the reminder that his life contained more than just the mess he'd made at work. Daddy, you're not listening, Maya said, watching him with those sharp 7-year-old eyes that missed nothing. I am. Paleontologists. Very cool. No, you're thinking about something else. You have your thinking face. She took a bite of pizza, considering him seriously. Is it about your job? Ethan hesitated. He'd always tried to shield Maya from adult problems, to keep her world simple and stable. But she was getting older, more perceptive, and he'd learned from his marriage that silence didn't protect anyone. It just created distance. Yeah, he said finally. It's about my job. I'm going to be leaving the company I work for, finding something new. Maya's eyes widened. Did you get fired? No, I chose to leave. Why? Because sometimes staying in a place makes things complicated for other people, and leaving is the right thing to do. She frowned, processing this. Is it because of the lady you've been seeing? Ethan nearly choked on his water. How do you... What lady? The one you don't talk about but you smile about when you check your phone, and you've been going out more, and you bought new clothes. Maya ticked off points on her fingers like a tiny detective. I'm not dumb, Daddy. I never said you were dumb. You're extremely smart, possibly too smart. He set down his glass, trying to figure out how much to say. Yes, I've been seeing someone, and it's complicated because we work at the same company, so I'm leaving to make it less complicated. Do you like her? Very much. Does she like you? I think so. I hope so. Maya considered this while she ate another piece of pizza. Finally, she said, Mom says you don't fight for things, that you just let them happen to you. The words hit Ethan like a slap. Your mom said that to you? Not to me. To Grandma, when she thought I wasn't listening. She said you were a good person, but you gave up too easy. Maya looked at him with those serious eyes. Are you giving up? Ethan stared at his daughter, this small person who saw through every careful explanation he tried to construct. I don't know, he said honestly. I'm trying to do the right thing, but maybe the right thing isn't always the smart thing. That doesn't make sense. I know. Adult problems often don't. They finished dinner and drove home, Maya falling asleep in the back seat before they reached the apartment. Ethan carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, still wearing her school clothes because he didn't have the heart to wake her, and then sat alone in his living room with Maya's words echoing in his head. Are you giving up? His phone sat on the coffee table, silent. No messages from Adrienne since that afternoon. He wondered what she was doing right now, whether she was still at the office, fighting battles he'd walked away from, whether she was home in that beautiful apartment, feeling as alone as he did. He picked up the phone and typed, I'm sorry. I know I handled today wrong, but I didn't know how else to protect you. The response came within seconds. I don't need protecting. I need a partner. I want to be that. But not if it costs you everything you've built. You keep deciding what things cost me without asking what I'm willing to pay. Ethan read the message 3 times, feeling the truth of it settle in his bones. She was right. He'd made a unilateral decision in that boardroom, the same way he'd made unilateral decisions throughout his marriage, choosing what felt safe instead of what felt true, protecting himself from pain by avoiding the fight entirely. Can I come over? He typed. Maya? Asleep. I can get the neighbor to listen for her. Then yes. Please. 20 minutes later, Ethan was standing in Adrienne's apartment again, but the atmosphere was completely different from the last time. No wine, no careful strategy sessions, just 2 people facing the wreckage of a choice that had been made too quickly. Adrienne looked exhausted. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and there were shadows under her eyes that makeup hadn't quite concealed. I spent 4 hours after you left trying to convince the board to back down, she said without preamble. I threatened to restructure. I threatened to take my biggest clients and start a new firm. I threatened things I probably shouldn't have threatened. Adrienne, let me finish. I fought for you. For us. And you know what Richard said at the end of it all? Her voice was tight with anger and hurt. He said, if Mr. Carter wanted to stay, he would have stayed. The fact that he resigned tells us everything we need to know about his commitment. Ethan felt the words like a physical blow. That's not fair. Isn't it? Adrienne crossed her arms. You resigned without consulting me, without giving me a chance to fight alongside you. You just decided, all on your own, that leaving was better than staying. How is that partnership? I was trying to make it easier for you. I don't want easier. I want honest. I want someone who shows up when things get hard instead of disappearing to protect me from complications. I'm perfectly capable of handling myself. I wasn't disappearing. Then what do you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what you did in your marriage. Things got difficult. Communication broke down, so you just left. Quietly. Politely. Without fighting for what mattered. The accusation hung between them, sharp and painful because it was true. Ethan had done exactly that with Sarah. He'd let the marriage die through silence and distance, convincing himself that quiet acceptance was noble instead of recognizing it as cowardice. "You're right," he said quietly. Adrienne blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. "What?" "You're right. I did the same thing I did in my marriage. I saw a problem, decided I was the problem, and removed myself from the equation. I thought I was being selfless, but really I was just scared." He moved closer to her. "I'm tired of being scared, Adrienne. I'm tired of making decisions based on what might go wrong instead of what might go right." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you were right in that boardroom. We restructure. We make my reporting line go through someone else entirely. We establish clear boundaries between professional and personal, and if the board doesn't like it, they can either accept it or replace you. But I'm betting they won't replace you because you're the best thing that ever happened to that company, and they know it." Adrienne's expression shifted, hope beginning to replace anger. "And your resignation?" "I withdraw it. Tomorrow morning, first thing. And if Richard or anyone else has a problem with it, they can take it up with both of us. Together. The gossip won't stop. People will still talk. Let them talk. We'll just have to make sure our work is so good that the talk doesn't matter." Adrienne stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the determination. "This isn't going to be easy." "I know. The board will push back. We'll have to prove ourselves constantly. Every decision we make will be scrutinized." "I know that too." "And if it doesn't work? If the complications become too much? Then we deal with it. Together. No more unilateral decisions, no more running away when things get hard." Ethan took her hands. "I can't promise it'll work perfectly, but I can promise I'll show up and fight for it. For us." She kissed him then, hard and desperate and relieved all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrienne rested her forehead against his. "I was so angry at you today," she whispered. "I know. You had every right to be. I'm still angry. I know that too. But I'm also glad you came back. Glad you're willing to try." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "No more running?" "No more running," Ethan promised. They spent the rest of the evening on her couch, not talking strategy this time, but simply being together. Adrienne fell asleep against his shoulder around 11, and Ethan sat very still, not wanting to wake her, thinking about all the ways his life had changed in the past 2 months. He'd come to Chicago 3 years ago looking for stability and found stagnation instead. He'd built a life so small and controlled that nothing could hurt him, but nothing could touch him either. And then Adrienne had appeared at that restaurant, forcing him to acknowledge that safety and happiness weren't the same thing. That sometimes the most important things required risk. His phone buzzed quietly, a text from his neighbor confirming Maya was still asleep, everything fine. Ethan responded with thanks and set the phone aside, careful not to disturb Adrienne. Tomorrow would bring its own complications. He'd have to formally withdraw his resignation, face the board's displeasure, deal with the gossip and speculation that would inevitably increase once people realized he was staying. Navigate the complex dynamics of dating someone who technically still had authority over his career. But tonight, with Adrienne sleeping peacefully beside him and the city lights spread out beyond the windows, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that the future might actually be better than the past. He left around midnight, taking an Uber back to his apartment. Maya was still asleep, and the neighbor reported no problems. Ethan paid her, checked on his daughter one more time, and then sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, drafting an email to Marcus and HR, withdrawing his resignation. The words came easier than expected. He explained that he'd made the decision too hastily, that upon reflection he believed he could continue contributing effectively to the company while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. He requested a meeting to discuss restructuring his reporting lines to address any conflicts of interest. It was professional, direct, and completely honest about the situation without apologizing for it. He hit send at 12:45 and went to bed, sleeping better than he had in days. The response came at 6:30 the next morning. Marcus, brief and to the point. Board meeting at 9. Both of you. Be ready. Ethan texted Adrienne immediately. You see Marcus's email? Yes. Let me handle most of the talking. You just back me up. That doesn't sound like partnership. Fine. We handle it together. But I know these people. Let me navigate the politics. Deal. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan reviewed every project he'd worked on in the past year, documenting his contributions and making sure he could defend the quality of his work, independent of any relationship with Adrienne. She did the same from her end, preparing a restructuring proposal that would move Ethan's reporting line through the operations division rather than strategy, eliminating the direct connection to her authority. They arrived at the executive floor separately, maintaining the appearance of professional distance, even though everyone in the building had probably already heard some version of yesterday's drama. The board members were waiting in the same conference room, wearing the same expressions of stern disapproval. Richard spoke first. Mr. Carter, Ms. Vale, we were surprised to receive your withdrawal this morning, Mr. Carter, particularly given yesterday's decisive action. I made a mistake, Ethan said evenly. I let the pressure of the situation drive a decision that wasn't well considered. Upon reflection, I believe I can continue serving the company effectively while addressing the concerns raised yesterday. The concerns haven't changed, the gray-haired woman said. The conflict of interest still exists, which is why we're proposing a structural solution, Adrienne interjected. She distributed copies of the restructuring plan, walking the board through the changes. Ethan would move to the operations division under Marcus's supervision. All performance reviews, compensation decisions, and project assignments would go through Marcus rather than Adrienne. They would maintain strict separation between professional and personal interactions during work hours. And you believe this addresses the optics? Richard asked skeptically. I believe it addresses the substance, Adrienne replied. The optics will be what people choose to make of them. But the reality is that Ethan's work has always been evaluated on its merits, not our personal relationship. This structure simply makes that evaluation process more transparent. What about future promotions? If Mr. Carter proves himself in the operations division, he could theoretically advance to a position where your relationship becomes relevant again. Then we deal with that when it happens, Ethan said, with the same transparency and structural solutions we're proposing now. But you can't make personnel decisions based on hypothetical future conflicts. You have to evaluate people on their current performance and potential. The board members exchanged glances. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying both of them carefully. You understand that this puts you under a microscope. Every decision involving either of you will be scrutinized. Any hint of favoritism or special treatment will be amplified. We understand, Adrienne said, and you're both willing to accept that level of scrutiny? Yes, they said in unison. More silence, more exchanged glances. Finally, Richard nodded slowly. We'll accept the restructuring proposal on a provisional basis. 6 months. If there are any issues, any perception of impropriety, any complaints from other employees, any indication that this relationship is affecting company operations, we revisit the conversation. And next time, Mr. Carter, the resignation will be permanent. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was agreement. Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Thank you, Adrienne said formally. We won't give you reason to regret this decision. They left the conference room together this time, side by side, and Ethan noticed the way people's eyes followed them through the executive corridor. The gossip would be relentless for weeks, months probably. Every interaction would be analyzed, every professional success questioned. But as they reached the elevator and Adrienne's hand brushed briefly against his, a touch too quick for anyone watching to be certain they'd seen it, Ethan realized he didn't care. Let people talk. Let them speculate. He'd spent 3 years trying to be invisible, and it had nearly cost him the first real connection he'd felt since his marriage ended. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. Marcus was waiting when Ethan returned to his floor, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Welcome to operations. Your new desk is near mine. I like to keep my people close. Does this mean more supervision or less privacy? Both. I run a tight ship, but I also trust my team to do their jobs without micromanagement. You'll figure out the balance. Marcus's expression grew more serious. That took guts, withdrawing your resignation. I wasn't sure you had it in you. I wasn't sure either, Ethan admitted. Well, now the real work starts. Proving to everyone that you earned your place here independent of who you're dating. You ready for that? I've always earned my place. Now I just have to make sure everyone else knows it. That's the spirit. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, let me show you your new desk. Fair warning. It's smaller than your old cubicle, and the guy next to you listens to jazz without headphones. Operations division is a different world. Ethan followed him, leaving behind the familiar space where he'd spent 3 years hiding, moving towards something uncertain but real. His phone buzzed as they walked. Adrienne, you okay? He typed back quickly. Better than okay. Thank you for fighting for us. We fought together. That's what partners do. Ethan smiled and pocketed his phone, ready to face whatever came next. The city spread out beyond the office windows, complicated, messy, full of risk and possibility, just like everything else worth having. The jazz music Marcus had warned about turned out to be the least of Ethan's challenges in the operations division. His new neighbor, a middle-aged analyst named David with a passion for Miles Davis and an encyclopedic knowledge of Chicago restaurant health code violations, was actually pleasant company. The real challenge came from everywhere else. The scrutiny started immediately. Every email Ethan sent was analyzed. Every meeting he attended was dissected for signs of preferential treatment. When he contributed an idea during a strategy session that Marcus praised, 3 people approached him afterward with thinly veiled questions about whether he'd gotten advance notice of the agenda. When he was assigned to a high-profile client project, whispers circulated that Adrienne had personally requested him despite the new reporting structure. None of it was true, but truth mattered less than perception. And the perception was that Ethan Carter had slept his way into relevance. He'd expected the gossip. What he hadn't expected was how much it would wear on him. Every sideways glance in the break room, every conversation that stopped abruptly when he approached, every knowing smile from colleagues who thought they understood something he didn't. It accumulated like weight, pressing down on his shoulders until some days he could barely breathe under it. Adrienne dealt with her own version of the same scrutiny. Board members questioned her judgment in meetings. Senior executives treated her decisions with newfound skepticism. Clients who'd worked with her for years suddenly asked pointed questions about the company's stability and leadership vision. She handled it with the same composed authority she brought to everything, but Ethan could see the toll it took. The exhaustion that lingered in her eyes during their rare private moments. The tension in her shoulders that never quite released. They'd agreed to maintain strict professional distance during work hours, which meant their relationship existed only in stolen evenings and carefully coordinated weekends. No public displays, no personal conversations in office spaces, no indication that they were anything more than CEO and analyst who happened to occupy the same building. It felt like holding his breath for 8 hours a day. 3 weeks into the new arrangement, Ethan was working late on a competitive analysis report when his phone buzzed with a text from Maya's mother. "We need to talk. Can you call when you have time?" Ethan's stomach tightened. Sarah only asked to talk when something was wrong. He saved his work and stepped into an empty conference room, dialing her number. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, thanks for calling back." "What's going on? Is Maya okay?" "Maya's fine. This is about something else." Sarah paused, and Ethan heard the familiar sound of her reorganizing her thoughts, choosing words carefully. "I got a job offer. A good one. Director position at a firm in Seattle." Seattle. Ethan's mind raced through implications. That's across the country. "I know, and I know what the custody agreement says. I'm supposed to give you 90 days notice before any relocation. I'm giving you 4 months. The position doesn't start until February." Miss Sarah, Seattle is... Maya's whole life is split between here and Minneapolis. Her friends, her school, her routine. You can't just... I'm not just anything. I'm trying to build a career while being a single parent, same as you. This opportunity is significant. It's the kind of position I've been working toward for years. Her voice softened slightly. I'm not trying to take her away from you, Ethan, but I need you to understand that my life can't stay frozen just because we share custody. Ethan closed his eyes, fighting back the familiar surge of helplessness. What are you proposing? I want to take Maya with me. She'd come back for holidays and summers. You could visit whenever you want. We'd make it work. That's not the same as seeing her every other weekend. That's not the same as being her father. You'll still be her father. Geography doesn't change that. It changes everything. Ethan's voice was harder now. She's 7 years old. She needs consistency, stability. Both of her parents present in her life, not scattered across time zones. Then come to Seattle. The suggestion landed like a brick. What? Come to Seattle. Find a job there. We don't have to be together, but we could co-parent in the same city. Maya would have both of us. You're always talking about stability. This could actually provide it. I have a life here, Sarah. A job. He stopped himself before saying relationship, but Sarah caught it anyway. A girlfriend? Her tone shifted, becoming sharper. Is that what this is about? You finally started dating again and you don't want to leave? That's not fair, isn't it? I've been trying to coordinate custody around your life for 3 years. The one time I ask you to consider mine, suddenly it's impossible because you've met someone? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what, Ethan? Maybe it's time you made a choice about what actually matters to you. Maya matters to me. She's always mattered. Then prove it. Think about Seattle, because I'm taking this job either way. The only question is whether you want to be part of Maya's daily life or just a voice on the phone in a few weeks every summer. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stood in the empty conference room, phone still pressed to his ear, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under him. He couldn't move to Seattle. His entire life was in Chicago now. The job Marcus had fought to keep him in, the relationship with Adrienne that was still too fragile to survive another major disruption. The apartment, the routine, the carefully constructed stability he'd built over 3 years. But Maya, his daughter, the person who mattered more than any job or relationship or comfortable routine, the person whose question echoed in his head now with devastating clarity, are you giving up? Ethan drove to Adrienne's apartment without calling first, which broke their unspoken rule about maintaining boundaries. But he couldn't sit alone with this decision, couldn't pretend he had the strength to process it in isolation. She opened the door in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, clearly not expecting company. Ethan, what's wrong? He walked past her into the apartment, pacing between the windows and the couch. Sarah got a job offer in Seattle. She's moving in February. She wants to take Maya. Adrienne closed the door slowly. Can she do that? Legally? Technically, she's supposed to give me notice, and we're supposed to negotiate. But if she really wants to go, the courts usually favor the primary custodial parent, which is her. I'd probably get visitation rights, holidays, summers, but not, his voice cracked, not every other weekend, not dinners on Thursdays, not being able to show up when she has a bad day at school. What did you tell her? Nothing yet. She suggested I move to Seattle too. Co-parent in the same city, even if we're not together. Adrienne was very still, her expression carefully neutral. What do you want to do? I don't know. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, feeling trapped by impossible mathematics. If I stay here, I lose Maya. Not completely, but enough that I won't really be her father anymore, just the guy she visits sometimes. But if I go to Seattle, I lose everything else. The job. You. All of it. So you're here because you want me to tell you it's okay to leave? Adrienne's voice was quiet, controlled, but Ethan heard the hurt underneath. No, I'm here because I can't make this decision alone, and you're the only person I trust enough to... He stopped, looking at her properly for the first time since arriving. I'm here because I don't want to lose you, but I can't lose Maya either. Adrienne moved to the couch, sitting down heavily. When I told you I was tired of choosing between my career and personal life, I meant it. But I didn't realize the universe would test that resolve quite so directly. This isn't about choosing career over, isn't it? If you move to Seattle for Maya, you're choosing family, which is noble and right and exactly what a good father would do. But it also means choosing to leave me, to leave us. Again. She looked up at him, and I can't ask you not to, because asking you to put our relationship ahead of your daughter would make me exactly the kind of person I never want to be. Ethan sat down beside her, the weight of the situation crushing. There has to be another option, some way to make this work that doesn't require… There isn't. You know there isn't. Adrienne took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Sarah's right to take the job. You're right to want to be close to Maya. And I'm right to not want to uproot my entire life and company to follow a relationship that's only a few months old. None of us are wrong. The situation just is what it is. So what? I just accept that? I don't know. Maybe. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Or maybe you fight for a different solution. Long distance, regular flights. Something creative that nobody's thought of yet. But Ethan, you can't make me the reason you don't go. I won't be the person who kept you from your daughter. They sat in silence for a long time, the city lights blinking through the windows like distant messages they couldn't decode. Ethan thought about all the careful plans they'd made, the restructured reporting lines and professional boundaries and strategies for managing board perceptions. All of it felt suddenly insignificant compared to the simple, brutal reality that sometimes life just didn't line up the way you needed it to. I should go, he said finally. Let you sleep. I'm sorry for showing up like this. Don't apologize. I'm glad you came. Adrienne squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, we'll figure out how to handle it. Together. That's what partners do, right? Right. But the word felt hollow, because how did you partner through someone leaving? How did you stay together across 2,000 miles and completely different lives? Ethan drove home through empty streets, his mind cycling through scenarios that all ended badly. He could stay in Chicago and watch Maya grow up through phone calls and summer visits, becoming progressively more distant from her life until he was just a name she mentioned occasionally. Or he could move to Seattle and start over completely. New job, new city, new everything, while his relationship with Adrienne withered through distance and competing priorities. Both options felt like losing. When he got home, there was an email waiting from Marcus, heard through the grapevine about Sarah's Seattle situation. Don't know if it's true or just rumor mill noise, but if you need to talk, my door's open. Figuratively, it's midnight. I'm not actually at the office. Ethan smiled despite everything. Marcus had become more than just a supervisor in the past few weeks. A mentor, maybe. Or something close to a friend. The kind of person who paid attention even when you tried to keep things private. He typed back a brief response. It's true. Trying to figure out what to do. The reply came surprisingly fast. Same advice as always. Stop trying to figure it out alone. Talk to people. Get perspectives. Make an informed decision instead of a scared one. Everyone I talk to just tells me there's no good answer. That's because there isn't. But there might be a less bad answer if you look hard enough. Sleep on it. We'll talk tomorrow. Ethan closed his laptop and went to check on Maya, who was sprawled across her bed with dinosaur books scattered around her like protective talismans. She looked so small, so completely unaware of the adult complications swirling around her life. He wanted to protect her from all of it, from the move, from the disruption, from having to adjust to yet another change in the fragile stability they'd built. But he couldn't. Children didn't get protected from life. They just got prepared for it as best as their parents could manage. He smoothed her hair back from her face, and she stirred slightly, mumbling something about pterodactyls before settling back into sleep. I won't let you down, Ethan whispered. I don't know how yet, but I won't. The next morning brought an unexpected conversation. Ethan was reviewing reports at his new desk when David leaned over the partition. Hey, you got a minute? Sure. What's up? David glanced around, making sure no one else was in earshot. I heard about your custody situation. Want to offer some perspective from someone who's been there. Ethan blinked. You've dealt with cross-country custody? My ex moved to Portland 5 years ago. Took our 2 kids. I stayed here because my whole career was in Chicago, and I couldn't imagine starting over. He paused. Biggest mistake I ever made. What happened? What always happens when you choose geography over presence. The kids adjusted to their new life, made new friends, built new routines, and I became the disruption, the guy who showed up occasionally and threw off their rhythm. By year 3, they started asking to skip visits, said it was too hard to leave their friends. Now they're teenagers and I barely know them. David's expression was heavy with regret. I tell myself it would have been the same even if I'd moved, that teenage kids drift from their parents regardless, but I'll never know for sure. And that uncertainty eats at me every single day. Ethan felt the story like a punch to the chest. So you're saying I should move to Seattle? I'm saying you should think very carefully about what you'll regret more, missing career opportunities or missing your daughter's childhood. Because you can rebuild a career anywhere, but you only get one chance to be present for these years. What about my relationship? I can't ask someone to... If it's real, you'll figure out how to make it work. If it's not, you'll figure that out too. But either way, that's an adult relationship between two people with choices. Your kid doesn't have choices. She's 7. She goes where her mother goes unless you show up and make being near you an equal priority. David straightened up, returning to his own work. Just something to think about. Ethan spent the rest of the morning unable to focus on anything except that conversation. By lunch, he was texting Adrian. Can we talk? Tonight? My place. 7. When he arrived that evening, Adrienne had wine already poured and takeout containers from their favorite Thai place spread across her kitchen counter. It felt like preparation for difficult news, and Ethan's stomach tightened as he walked in. I've been thinking, they both said simultaneously, then stopped, surprised. You first, Adrian said. Ethan took a breath. I talked to a guy at work today. He let his ex move across the country with his kids and stayed for his career. Now he barely knows them. And I keep thinking about Maya asking me if I give up too easily, about my ex-wife saying I let things happen to me instead of fighting. He met Adrienne's eyes. I can't do that with Maya. I can't choose comfort over being her father. Adrienne nodded slowly. I know. I've been thinking the same thing. You have? I stayed up most of last night going through scenarios, trying to find some configuration that would let you stay in Chicago and still be a real parent to Maya. And there isn't one. Not really. Video calls and summer vacations aren't the same as being there for school plays and bad days and ordinary Tuesdays. She paused. You need to go to Seattle. Hearing her say it made it real in a way Ethan wasn't prepared for. And us? I don't know yet, but I've been thinking about that too. Adrienne gestured to her laptop, open on the counter with what looked like business plans and financial projections. What if we didn't have to figure out long distance? What if there was a third option? What do you mean? She pulled up a document, turning the laptop so he could see. I've been wanting to expand the company for years, open satellite offices in other markets. Seattle's a growing tech hub with exactly the kind of clients we target. What if I opened a division there? Not immediately. It would take time to set up properly. But within 6 months, maybe 8, I could split my time between Chicago and Seattle, build something new while maintaining what we've already established here. Ethan stared at the screen, his mind trying to process what she was suggesting. You'd move to Seattle? For me? Not just for you. For us. And for the company. This isn't charity, Ethan. It's strategy. Seattle makes business sense independent of our relationship. But yes, our relationship is part of why I'm willing to take on the complexity of managing 2 locations. She closed the laptop. I'm tired of treating my personal life and professional life like they're competing priorities. Maybe they don't have to be. Maybe I can build something that accommodates both. Adrienne, the board would never approve. The board doesn't get to approve my expansion plans. That's part of the company bylaws I insisted on when we incorporated. As long as I'm hitting revenue targets and maintaining fiduciary responsibility, strategic decisions are mine to make. She smiled slightly. One of the few benefits of being the founder. But splitting your time between 2 cities, building a whole new division, all while managing the scrutiny we're already under here, that's massive. That's a lot of work. I know. But I've been looking for a new challenge anyway. The Chicago operation is stable. Marcus can handle day-to-day here. And honestly, she looked at him directly. I don't want to lose this. What we're building. It's worth the complication. Ethan felt something in his chest loosen, not quite hope, but maybe the possibility of hope. When would I need to move? Sarah said February, right? That gives us 3 months. You could go initially, get Maya settled, find an apartment. I'd stay here managing the Chicago office while setting up the Seattle expansion. Then once the new division is operational, I'd start spending maybe 1 week a month there. Maybe more, depending on how it grows. 1 week a month isn't, it's more than nothing. It's something to build on. And who knows? Maybe the Seattle office takes off and I end up spending more time there. Maybe Maya gets older and the custody arrangement changes again. Life isn't static, Ethan. We adjust. She took his hands. I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm saying it might be possible. And possible feels like a lot more than what we had yesterday. Ethan pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly while his mind raced through implications and logistics and 1,000 potential complications. But underneath all of that was a simple, profound relief. He didn't have to choose. At least not completely. Not immediately. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Really?" Adrienne pulled back enough to look at him. "Because I watched my mother clean other people's houses for 30 years while her own dreams gathered dust. She always said she'd go back to school someday, start her own business someday, travel someday. But someday never came because she was too busy being practical, being safe, making the sensible choice." Her voice was thick with emotion. "I built this company so I'd never have to make those choices. So I could have the career and the life and whatever else I wanted. And then I spent 15 years being so focused on the career that I forgot about the life part. Until you." She kissed him, soft and certain, and Ethan kissed her back with the full weight of gratitude and love and terrified hope that this impossible plan might actually work. They spent the rest of the evening working through details. Ethan would give Sarah a conditional yes. He'd move to Seattle in February as long as certain custody arrangements were formalized. Adrienne would begin preliminary research on the Seattle market, identifying potential clients and office locations. They'd keep the plan quiet for now, avoiding board complications until the expansion was far enough along to present as fait accompli. It felt like they were plotting a heist instead of planning a future. But maybe that's what building something real required: strategic thinking and careful execution, and the willingness to break a few rules when the rules stopped making sense. Ethan left her apartment close to midnight, driving home through the city that had become his sanctuary and would soon become his past. Chicago had given him space to rebuild after his marriage ended, but maybe rebuilding wasn't supposed to be permanent. Maybe it was just preparation for the next thing, whatever that turned out to be. His phone buzzed as he pulled into his parking space. A text from Sarah. "Have you thought about what I said?" He typed back carefully. "Yes. I'll come to Seattle, but I want formal custody arrangements. Real co-parenting, not just visiting rights." Her response came quickly. "Agreed. I'll have my lawyer draft something." "Thank you for this, Ethan. I know it's not easy. It's not. But Maya's worth it. She really is." Ethan sat in his car for a long moment after the exchange ended, looking up at his apartment building. 3 years he'd lived here. 3 years of routine and safety and carefully managed expectations. It hadn't been a bad life. Just a small one. Maybe it was time for something bigger. He went inside, checked on Maya one more time, and then pulled out his laptop to start researching Seattle. Job markets, neighborhoods, schools, the practical details of uprooting everything he'd built and starting over. But this time, he wasn't starting over alone. This time, he had someone willing to meet him halfway across the country. Someone willing to build something complicated and messy and real. And that, Ethan thought as dawn began to lighten his windows, made all the difference. The 3 months between November and February moved with the strange dual quality of feeling both impossibly fast and painfully slow. Ethan found himself living in 2 timelines simultaneously: the present, where he still showed up to the operations division every day and navigated the endless scrutiny of his relationship with Adrienne, and the future, where he was already mentally packing boxes and researching Seattle neighborhoods. Maya knew something was changing. Children always knew, even when adults tried to shield them. She asked more questions about Seattle, about her mother's new job, about whether Daddy would visit or if she'd visit him. Ethan tried to explain gently that he'd be coming with her, that they'd live in the same city again, but Maya's face crumpled with confusion. "But you live here," she said, as if Chicago's existence was the only constant in a world of shifting variables. "Your apartment is here. Your work is here. I can find new work in Seattle and a new apartment. What matters is being near you. What about the lady you like? Is she coming too?" Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She has to stay in Chicago for now because her work is here. But she'll visit, and maybe later she'll spend more time in Seattle, too. Maya processed this with the brutal honesty of 7-year-olds. That sounds complicated. It is. But sometimes the important things are complicated. I don't want you to be far away from her. You smile more now. The observation caught Ethan off guard. He pulled Maya into a hug, feeling the weight of every choice pressing down on him. I'll still smile. I promise. But he wondered if that was true. If the distance and the logistics and the sheer effort of maintaining a relationship across 2,000 miles wouldn't slowly erode whatever they were building into something that existed more in theory than reality. Adrienne seemed to have the same fears, though she expressed them differently. She threw herself into the Seattle expansion with an intensity that bordered on obsession, working 18-hour days to build a business case that even the most skeptical board member couldn't dismiss. She researched market conditions, identified potential clients, and created financial projections that showed the Seattle office breaking even within 2 years and turning significant profit by year 5. When she finally presented the plan to the board in early December, Richard and the gray-haired woman, whose name Ethan had learned was Margaret, pushed back hard. "This feels reactionary," Richard said, scanning the proposal documents. "You've never mentioned Seattle as a priority market before. Why now?" "Because the opportunity is right," Adrienne replied smoothly. "The tech sector there is growing faster than any comparable market. Our competitors are already establishing presence. If we wait another year, we'll have missed the window." "Or," Margaret interjected, "this is about following Mr. Carter to his new city, and you're using company resources to subsidize a personal relationship." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Adrienne didn't flinch. "Ethan's relocation is a factor in the timing, yes. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But the business case stands independent of my personal life. You can verify every projection in that document. Talk to industry analysts. Review the market research. Seattle makes strategic sense whether I'm dating someone there or not." "But you are dating someone there," Richard said, "which creates the appearance that you're prioritizing personal convenience over shareholder value. Then evaluate the plan on its merits instead of my motivations. If the numbers don't work, vote it down. But don't vote it down because you're uncomfortable with my personal life." Adrienne's voice remained level, but steel ran underneath. "I've built this company from nothing. I've delivered consistent growth every year for 15 years. I've earned the right to take calculated risks. This is one of them." The board voted narrowly to approve a feasibility study. Not the full expansion, but permission to explore it further. It was progress, but tentative, conditional. The kind of half-yes that meant Adrienne would have to prove herself every step of the way. She called Ethan that night, exhausted but determined. "They approved the study. It's not full approval, but it's enough to start." "What does that mean practically?" "It means I can spend January doing site visits in Seattle, meeting potential clients, building relationships, laying groundwork. Then in February, when you move, I'll have a clearer picture of whether this can actually work." "And if it can't?" Adrienne was quiet for a moment. "Then we figure out plan C. But let's not assume failure before we've even tried." December arrived with early snow and the kind of bone-deep cold that made Chicago feel hostile. Ethan began the slow process of dismantling his life, giving notice on his apartment, sorting through 3 years of accumulated possessions, deciding what was essential and what could be left behind. The process felt archaeological, like excavating layers of the person he'd been and deciding which parts were worth carrying forward. Marcus helped him box up his desk on a Friday afternoon, the operations division mostly empty as people left early for holiday parties. "You're really doing this," Marcus said, taping a box shut. "Looks like it. How do you feel about it?" Ethan considered the question. "Terrified? Hopeful? Exhausted? All of the above. That sounds about right for any major life change." Marcus set the box aside and leaned against the desk. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice? Have I ever been able to stop you?" "Fair point." Marcus smiled briefly. "When you get to Seattle, don't try to rebuild what you had here. Build something new, better. Whatever you and Adrienne create needs to be designed for the reality of your lives, not some theoretical version where everything is simple and proximity solves all problems." "You're saying long distance won't work." "I'm saying it won't work if you approach it like a temporary inconvenience you're waiting to end. It has to be the relationship, not a placeholder until the real relationship starts. Marcus picked up another box. You're both strategic thinkers. Use that. Design something intentional instead of just hoping it works out. The word stayed with Ethan through the holidays. He spent Christmas with Maya in Minneapolis, the three of them, Ethan, Sarah, and Maya, attempting a civil celebration that felt awkward but necessary. Sarah's new job started January 15th, which meant she'd be moving to Seattle 2 weeks before Ethan could join her. They'd agreed that Maya would stay with Ethan in Chicago during that transition period, giving Sarah time to find housing and get settled before her daughter arrived. On Christmas Eve, after Maya had gone to bed in Sarah's spare room, Ethan and his ex-wife sat in her kitchen drinking coffee and negotiating the details of their new arrangement. I appreciate you doing this, Sarah said quietly. Moving to Seattle. I know it's not easy. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Maya. I know, but still. She wrapped her hands around her mug. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. She needs you present, not peripheral. I wish you'd thought about that before accepting a job 2,000 miles away. Sarah's expression hardened slightly. That's not fair. I've structured my entire life around co-parenting for 3 years. I've turned down opportunities, stayed in Minneapolis when I wanted to leave, put my career on hold because it was the right thing to do for Maya. This job is the first time I've prioritized my own professional growth. Don't make me the villain for that. Ethan sighed, the fight draining out of him. You're right. I'm sorry. This whole situation is just complicated. Yeah, it is. Sarah refilled both their cups. How's Adrienne handling it? She's opening a Seattle office, or trying to. The board is making it difficult. Because of you? Because of us. They think she's making business decisions based on personal factors. Is she? Ethan thought about how to answer that honestly. Partly, but the business case is solid. She's not being reckless. Good. Because Maya's already dealing with enough upheaval. She doesn't need your relationship drama on top of it. Sarah met his eyes. I'm serious, Ethan. If this thing with Adrienne is going to fall apart, let it fall apart now. Don't drag Maya through months of you two trying to make long-distance work and slowly growing to resent each other. It's not going to fall apart. You don't know that. No, Ethan admitted. But I'm choosing to believe it anyway. Sarah studied him for a long moment. You're different than you were during our marriage. More willing to fight for what you want. I've learned some things. Apparently, she smiled slightly. I hope it works out. I really do. You deserve to be happy. So do you. They sat in companionable silence, two people who'd tried to build a life together and failed, but who were still trying, in their messy, imperfect way, to build something functional for the person they both loved. January arrived with brutal clarity. Sarah moved to Seattle on the 15th, leaving Maya with Ethan for 2 weeks while she found an apartment and enrolled Maya in a new school. Those 2 weeks felt like borrowed time, a preview of what custody might look like if he'd stayed in Chicago. Maya back in his apartment full-time instead of every other weekend. Breakfast together every morning. Homework at the kitchen table every evening. The ordinary rhythms of daily parenting instead of the compressed intensity of weekend visits. He loved it and dreaded it simultaneously. Loved having her there, dreaded what it represented, the possibility of losing this if Seattle didn't work out. Adrienne spent the month traveling between Chicago and Seattle, building relationships and testing the viability of the expansion. She returned from each trip with updates, a potential client interested in their services, a good office space in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, a local communications professional who might be interested in joining a new division. The pieces were coming together slowly, but they were coming together. She visited Ethan's apartment one evening in late January, sitting on the floor with Maya while they worked on a school project about ocean ecosystems. Watching them together, Adrienne asking thoughtful questions about whale migration, while Maya explained with the authority of someone who'd watched every nature documentary ever made. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real. These were the people who mattered, and he was choosing them both. After Maya went to bed, Adrienne helped Ethan pack more boxes, wrapping dishes in newspaper and labeling containers with neat, precise handwriting. The board approved the Seattle office, she said without preamble. Full approval, starting March 1st. Ethan stopped packing. Seriously? Richard voted against it. Margaret abstained, but the other board members saw the potential. We're moving forward. She set down the dish she'd been wrapping. I'll spend March in Chicago transitioning my responsibilities to Marcus and the senior team. Then starting April, I'll be in Seattle 1 week a month. Maybe more, depending on how fast the office grows. 1 week a month? Ethan tried to calculate what that meant practically. 3 weeks apart, 1 week together, repeated indefinitely until something changed. I know it's not ideal, but it's more than I thought we'd have. Adrienne moved closer to him. We can make this work, Ethan. It won't be easy or simple, but we can make it work. You keep saying that, but what if we can't? What if the distance is too much and then we fail, but we fail trying, which is better than not trying at all. She touched his face gently. I spent 15 years not trying, playing it safe, choosing the path that protected me from pain but also from joy. I'm done with that. I'd rather risk everything and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Ethan kissed her, tasting salt and hope, and the bittersweet knowledge that they were about to test whether love was actually enough when geography and logistics conspired against it. The move happened on a gray February morning. Professional movers loaded Ethan's minimal possessions onto a truck, while Maya watched from the building entrance, clutching her favorite stuffed brachiosaurus. Adrienne had taken the morning off to help, orchestrating the logistics with the same competence she brought to client presentations. When the truck was finally loaded, Ethan stood in his empty apartment one last time. 3 years. 3 years of healing and hiding and slowly learning to be human again. The space looked smaller without furniture, more vulnerable somehow, but also ready. Ready for whoever came next, whoever needed a safe place to rebuild. You okay? Adrienne asked from the doorway. Yeah, just saying goodbye. Chicago's not going anywhere. You can always come back. I know, but I won't be the same person if I do. He took her hand. Thank you for all of this, for being willing to make this complicated. Complicated is just another word for real. She squeezed his hand. Come on, you've got a flight to catch. They drove to O'Hare together, Adrienne's car following the moving truck through traffic. Maya fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the morning's excitement. At the airport, they said goodbye at the curb. No long farewell, no dramatic scene. Just a kiss and a promise to call when he landed. 1 month, Adrienne said. I'll be there in 1 month. I'll have the guest room ready. I'm not sleeping in the guest room. Ethan smiled despite the ache in his chest. Then I'll have our room ready. He watched her drive away, then turned to wake Maya and navigate the familiar chaos of airport security and gate changes. The flight to Seattle was unremarkable. 3 hours of Maya asking questions about their new city, while Ethan tried to focus on the logistics of arrival instead of the person he'd just left behind. Sarah picked them up at SeaTac, looking simultaneously exhausted and energized. She'd found an apartment in the Ballard neighborhood, 2 bedrooms, close to Maya's new school, with a small balcony that overlooked a community garden. Your place is in Capitol Hill, Sarah told Ethan as she navigated Seattle traffic. I found you a 1-bedroom about 15 minutes from here. It's small, but the neighborhood is good. Lots of restaurants and coffee shops, very walkable. You found me an apartment? Seemed easier than having you hotel hop while you looked. I sent you the listing last week. Did you not see it? Ethan vaguely remembered an email he'd meant to respond to but never had. Thanks. Thank you. They dropped Maya at Sarah's apartment, giving her time to settle in before Ethan's custody days started. Then Sarah drove him to Capitol Hill, pointing out landmarks along the way. The school Maya would attend, parks she might like. The grocery store Sarah used. The apartment was exactly as advertised. Small, functional, completely impersonal. But it had good light and hardwood floors and windows that looked out over a street lined with cherry trees that would bloom in a few months. It's not much, Sarah said. It's fine. It's a start. Ethan set down his suitcase, looking around at the empty space that would become his life. I can make it work. Sarah left him to unpack, and Ethan spent the afternoon transforming blank space into something resembling home. His furniture wouldn't arrive for another week, but he had an air mattress and enough clothes to get by. He hung pictures of Maya on the walls, set up his laptop on the kitchen counter, made a list of things he'd need. Dishes, towels, a coffee maker, curtains. The mundane tasks helped quiet the noise in his head. This was happening. He was here. He'd chosen Maya and he'd chosen Adrienne, and now he had to figure out how to build a life that honored both choices. His phone rang around 7. Adrienne. "How's Seattle?" she asked. "Rainy, gray, smaller than I expected." He looked out the window at the city beginning to light up as evening fell. "But I think I can learn to like it." "What's the apartment like?" "Empty. Lonely. But it has potential." "Everything has potential." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow you start job hunting. You'll need energy." "I miss you already." "I miss you too. But 1 month, just 1 month, and I'll be there." They talked for another hour about nothing important. The flight, the apartment, Maya's reaction to the new city. When they finally hung up, Ethan felt marginally less alone. The first few weeks in Seattle were harder than he'd anticipated. Job hunting proved more challenging than expected. His experience was solid, but Chicago-specific, and Seattle employers kept asking why he'd moved without a position already lined up. He eventually found contract work at a mid-sized communications firm, nothing permanent but enough to pay rent and build local experience. Custody arrangements with Sarah started off bumpy. They'd agreed to a flexible schedule that gave Ethan more than traditional every other weekend visitation, but implementing that flexibility required constant negotiation. Maya struggled with the transition, acting out at school and having meltdowns about small things that symbolized larger anxieties. But there were good moments, too. Taking Maya to Pike Place Market on Saturday mornings, watching her delight at the fish throwers and the flower stalls. Finding a paleontology exhibit at the Burke Museum that she visited so many times the staff started recognizing her. Building routines in his small Capitol Hill apartment, breakfast at the kitchen counter, homework on the couch, bedtime stories about dinosaurs who solved mysteries. Adrienne arrived in early April as promised, stepping off the plane with her laptop bag and a suitcase, and the same determined expression she brought to every challenge. Ethan picked her up from the airport, and the drive back to his apartment felt simultaneously natural and surreal. This person who dominated his thoughts for months was suddenly physically present in his new life, and he didn't quite know how to reconcile the distance version of their relationship with the proximity version. But Adrienne navigated the transition with characteristic grace. She admired the apartment, met Maya for dinner at a pizza place Ethan had discovered, and spent the week dividing her time between client meetings for the new Seattle office and quiet evenings in Ethan's small space. "This could work," she said on her last night there, lying in bed while rain pattered against the windows. "The office has real potential. I met 3 clients who want to sign contracts. The local hire I interviewed is perfect, sharp, strategic, knows the market." "So you'll keep coming back?" "Every month. Maybe twice a month once we're fully operational. The Chicago team can handle most things remotely." She turned to face him. "I know this isn't what either of us imagined, but it's something. We're building something." "I know." Ethan pulled her closer. "It's just hard, having you here and knowing you're leaving again." "Then we make the time we have count, quality over quantity." She kissed him softly. "We're not the first people to try long distance. We're just the first people trying it our way." The pattern continued through spring and into summer. Adrienne came to Seattle once a month, sometimes twice. Ethan's contract work turned into a full-time position with benefits. Maya adjusted slowly to her new school, making friends and joining the after-school science club. Sarah started dating someone, a project manager at her new company, and seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. The Seattle office opened officially in June with modest fanfare, a small team, 3 major clients, and projections that suggested profitability within 18 months. Adrienne split her time increasingly between cities, spending 2 weeks in Seattle and 2 weeks in Chicago in alternating cycles. It wasn't perfect. They fought about schedules and missed connections and the exhaustion of maintaining a relationship across time zones. Ethan struggled with jealousy when Adrienne was in Chicago without him, attending company events and socializing with colleagues he no longer knew. Adrienne struggled with the isolation of Seattle, where she didn't have the same support network she'd built over 15 years in Chicago. But they also laughed together, built inside jokes, created traditions. Friday night dinners at the Thai place near Ethan's apartment, Saturday morning walks around Green Lake, Sunday afternoon planning sessions where they coordinated calendars and negotiated the logistics of their complicated life. Maya asked questions about when Adrienne would move to Seattle full-time, and Adrienne answered honestly, maybe someday, but not yet. The company still needed her in Chicago. The Seattle office was still too new to run without regular oversight, but she was working toward it, slowly, deliberately. Is that good enough? Maya asked with characteristic directness. For you and Daddy? Adrienne considered the question seriously. It's good enough for now, because sometimes now is all you get, and you have to decide whether now is enough or whether you need a different someday. That's confusing. I know, adult relationships are confusing, but your dad and I are figuring it out together. That's what matters. The real test came in September, when the Chicago board demanded Adrienne return full-time to manage a client crisis. A major account was threatening to leave, and the Chicago team couldn't handle it without her direct involvement. She'd already been in Seattle for 10 days. She'd planned to stay another week. She called Ethan from the airport, frustrated and apologetic. I have to go back. The client is insisting on meeting with me personally. If we lose this account, it affects everything. The Seattle office, my credibility with the board, the whole expansion. I understand. I know you understand, but I also know you're disappointed. He was, deeply. They'd planned that week carefully. Maya was with Sarah. They'd have uninterrupted time. They'd talk about maybe looking for a larger apartment that could accommodate Adrienne's increasingly frequent visits. But client needs trumped personal plans. They always did in this industry. We'll figure it out, Ethan said, trying to mean it. Handle the client. Come back when you can. But Adrienne heard what he didn't say. You're pulling away. I'm not. You are. I can hear it in your voice. That careful distance, that tone that says you're protecting yourself from disappointment. She paused. We promise no more running. That includes emotional running. Ethan closed his eyes. She was right. He was already building walls, already preparing for the possibility that this wouldn't work. Old habits from his marriage, resurfacing when things got hard. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to need you when you're not available. How to be patient when I'm tired of being patient. So tell me that instead of pretending you're fine. We solve problems together, remember? But I can't solve something I don't know is broken. They talked for another hour, working through the disappointment and the logistics and the larger question neither of them wanted to ask. Was this sustainable long-term, or were they just delaying an inevitable ending? By the time they hung up, Ethan felt marginally better. Not fixed, but at least honest, at least still trying. Adrienne stayed in Chicago for 3 weeks managing the client situation. By the time she returned to Seattle in early October, Ethan had made a decision. I want you to meet someone, he said when he picked her up from the airport. Who? A therapist. Well, a couples counselor, technically. I found someone who specializes in long-distance relationships. I made an appointment for us tomorrow. Adrienne was quiet for a moment. You think we need counseling? I think we need help figuring out how to make this work without slowly destroying each other. And I don't want to wait until we're already destroyed to get that help. He glanced at her. Is that okay? She reached across the console and took his hand. Yes, it's more than okay. It's exactly what we should do. The counselor, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Patricia Chen, specialized in what she called geographic complexity in relationships. She'd worked with military couples, expatriate families, and professionals managing dual-city careers. She didn't promise solutions, but she did promise strategies. The biggest mistake couples make in long-distance relationships is treating them as temporary, Dr. Chen said in their first session. You're always waiting for the real relationship to start. When you're in the same city, when logistics are easier, when life settles down. But waiting means you're not fully invested in the present. You're living in a perpetual state of not quite enough. So what's the alternative? Adrienne asked. Accept that this is your relationship, not a placeholder, not a transition phase. This is it. And then design it intentionally to be sustainable and satisfying within those parameters. Over the following months, they worked with Dr. Chen to build something more deliberate. They established communication protocols, daily check-ins at set times instead of random texts that created anxiety when unanswered. They created rituals that transcended geography, watching the same shows simultaneously while on video calls, reading the same books and discussing them, even cooking the same meals in their separate kitchens. They also established boundaries. Adrienne committed to a minimum of one Seattle visit per month, no matter what client emergencies arose. Ethan committed to flying to Chicago quarterly to maintain connection with the company and the city that had been his home. They agreed that business would sometimes intrude on personal time, but personal time would also sometimes take precedence over business. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. And function, Dr. Chen reminded them, was often more important than romance. The breakthrough came in December, nearly a year after Ethan's move to Seattle. Adrienne arrived for her monthly visit, carrying news that she delivered over dinner at their usual Thai restaurant. The board approved a full-time operations manager for Chicago, she said. Marcus is taking the role, which means I can shift most of my responsibilities there and focus primarily on Seattle. Ethan set down his fork. What does that mean practically? It means starting in February, I'll be in Seattle 3 weeks a month instead of 1. Chicago once a month instead of Seattle once a month. She reached across the table. It means I'm moving here. Really moving. Not visiting. Not splitting time. Making Seattle my primary base and Chicago secondary. Adrienne, I know what you're going to say. That I'm sacrificing too much. That I'm giving up Chicago for you. But that's not what this is. Her expression was intense, earnest. The Seattle office is growing faster than Chicago ever did. The clients here are better aligned with where I want to take the company. And Marcus is ready to run the Chicago operation. This isn't sacrifice, it's evolution. The company is evolving, and I'm evolving with it. What about the board? They're not thrilled, but the numbers don't lie. Seattle is profitable. The expansion worked. They can't argue with success. She smiled. And honestly, I'm tired of caring what they think. I built something impossible. I'm allowed to run it however I want. Ethan stood, pulling her up into a kiss that tasted like relief and vindication, and the particular joy of watching impossible things become real. Around them, the restaurant continued its normal rhythm. Other couples eating, waitstaff clearing tables, the soft murmur of conversation. But in their small corner, the world had shifted. We did it, Ethan said quietly. We actually made this work. We're still making it work. This isn't the end. It's just a different chapter. Adrienne pulled back to look at him. I'm going to need a bigger apartment than your guest room. I was thinking we look for a place together. Something with actual space. Room for Maya when she's with us. A real office for you. Maybe even a second bedroom for when Chicago people visit. That sounds expensive. Good thing you're a successful CEO who just opened a profitable satellite office. They laughed, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. Not just since the divorce. Since before that. Since he'd first started believing that stability meant stagnation and safety meant settling. Maya's reaction to the news was enthusiastic and pragmatic in equal measure. Does this mean Adrienne will be here more? A lot more, Ethan confirmed. Good. She helps with math homework better than you do. That's probably true. Are you going to get married? Ethan blinked at the directness of the question. We haven't talked about that yet. But you should, because then she'd officially be part of our family instead of just visiting. She's already part of our family. Not officially. Maya considered this seriously. You should ask her, but not yet. Wait until she's lived here for a while and make sure she likes it. Then ask her. That's actually very wise advice. I know, I'm good at advice. Maya returned to her dinosaur book. The matter settled as far as she was concerned. They found an apartment in January, a 2-bedroom in Fremont with views of the ship canal and enough space for all of them to coexist comfortably. Adrienne moved in February 1st, her belongings arriving in a truck significantly larger than Ethan's had been. The apartment slowly transformed into something that belonged to both of them. Her books mixed with his, her art on the walls beside Maya's drawings, their lives blending in the organic way that happened when people stopped trying to maintain separation. The Chicago office continued under Marcus's capable leadership. Adrienne visited once a month, maintaining relationships and oversight, but no longer carrying the daily operational burden. The Seattle office grew steadily, adding staff and clients and establishing itself as a legitimate player in the Pacific Northwest market. Ethan's career evolved too. His position at the mid-sized communications firm led to a senior analyst role, then a division head position that came with actual authority and the respect of colleagues who knew his work independent of any connection to Adrienne. He built a professional reputation in Seattle that was entirely his own, proving to himself what he'd always tried to prove to the Chicago board, that his value wasn't derivative. Sarah's relationship with her project manager turned serious, and by summer, they were talking about moving in together. Co-parenting with Ethan settled into a rhythm that worked more often than it didn't: flexible schedules, honest communication, and the shared goal of raising Maya in an environment where she felt loved by everyone in her expanding family circle. In October, nearly 2 years after moving to Seattle, Ethan took Maya's advice. He planned carefully. A dinner reservation at the restaurant where everything had started in Chicago, timing his Chicago visit to coincide with Adrienne's monthly trip there. They sat at a corner table that felt similar to the one where they'd first met, though the restaurant and city were different. "This feels familiar," Adrienne said, smiling at the menu. "It should. I'm recreating our first date. Are you going to be surprised by who shows up?" "Not this time. This time I know exactly who I'm having dinner with." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know what I'm choosing and why, and I'm done questioning whether it's the right choice." They talked through dinner about nothing important and everything important simultaneously: the Seattle office's newest client, Maya's science fair project, whether they should get a dog. When dessert arrived, Ethan pulled out a small box that made Adrienne's eyes widen. "Ethan, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring that had taken him weeks to select. "I spent 3 years in Chicago hiding from my life. And then you ambushed me with a blind date and forced me to stop hiding. You've been forcing me to stop hiding ever since, to show up, to fight, to believe that complicated is better than safe, and that real is better than comfortable." "Ethan," Adrienne said again, but she was smiling now, tears forming in her eyes. "I want to spend the rest of my life showing up for you. For us. For whatever complicated, messy, real thing we keep building together. Will you marry me?" "Yes." She was laughing and crying simultaneously. "Obviously, yes. How is that even a question?" He slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed across the table while other diners pretended not to watch, and the server tactfully disappeared to give them privacy. When they finally pulled apart, Adrienne was still laughing. "Maya's going to say I told you so." "She absolutely is. How long has she been coaching you on this?" "Since about 2 days after you moved to Seattle. She's very invested in making sure I don't screw this up." "Smart kid." The smartest." They called Maya together from the restaurant, putting her on speakerphone so they could share the news. Her response was exactly what Ethan expected. "Finally, I've been waiting forever. Can I be in the wedding?" "Of course you can be in the wedding," Adrienne said. "We couldn't do it without you." "Can I wear a dinosaur costume?" "Absolutely not," Ethan and Adrienne said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. "We'll negotiate," Adrienne amended. "Maybe dinosaur accessories." They flew back to Seattle the next day and started planning a wedding that would be small, intimate, and scheduled around the impossible logistics of their lives. They chose a date in early spring, when Seattle's cherry trees would be blooming and the rain would hopefully take a brief pause. They invited close friends and family only. Marcus came from Chicago. Sarah and her partner attended with genuine happiness. Maya served as a combination flower girl and junior bridesmaid, who did indeed negotiate dinosaur earrings into her outfit. The ceremony took place in a small botanical garden, surrounded by flowers and the people who mattered. When the officiant asked if they promised to love and support each other through all the complications life would bring, they both answered with absolute certainty. "I do." Because they'd already proven they could. Already built something that survived distance and scrutiny and every logical reason it shouldn't work. Already chosen each other repeatedly when choosing anything else would have been easier. The reception was in the same garden, under strings of lights as evening fell. Marcus gave a speech about 2 stubborn people who'd somehow figured out how to be stubborn together. Sarah gave a toast about second chances and the courage to try again. Maya gave a surprisingly eloquent statement about families being made of people who show up, not just people who share DNA. And Ethan and Adrienne danced together while Seattle's skyline glittered in the distance and cherry blossoms drifted down like benediction. They'd come so far from that first awkward dinner in Chicago, from the CEO and the analyst who were supposed to stay separate, who were supposed to maintain boundaries and professional distance, and all the careful protections people built to avoid getting hurt. They'd broken every rule, violated every protocol, chosen the complicated path over the safe one repeatedly until complicated became normal and safe became irrelevant. And standing there in Adrian's arms, with Maya dancing nearby and their future spreading out before them full of unknowns and possibilities, Ethan realized something fundamental. The best things in life weren't the ones you planned. They were the ones you chose to fight for when every rational voice said to walk away. When the board said it was impossible. When geography said it wouldn't work. When fear said it was too risky. The best things required showing up, staying present, believing that partnership meant solving problems together instead of avoiding them separately. 3 years ago, he'd walked into a restaurant expecting an awkward evening with a stranger. Instead, he'd found someone who saw through his careful invisibility and demanded he become visible. Someone who pushed him to fight for what mattered instead of accepting what was safe. Someone who built impossible things and refused to believe that impossible meant unchangeable. The song ended and another began. Adrienne rested her head against his shoulder, and Ethan held her close, grateful for blind dates and pushy COOs and the particular courage it took to try again after failure. Grateful for Seattle rain and Chicago winters and every mile between cities that they'd learned to cross. Grateful most of all for this. The ordinary miracle of two people choosing each other day after day, building something real from the messy raw materials of hope and effort and stubborn, persistent love. The cherry blossoms kept falling, and the music kept playing, and somewhere in the gathering dusk, their complicated, beautiful, hard-won life together continued unfolding exactly as it should.